Hello there, Internet peeps. It's your good buddy Rue. I'm here with Season two's first trade special. Before I get started, just one special note. Most of the books I read for this because I'm kind of poor. I got from the library. Seriously, if you want to try new things, ask your library if they have it, because it helps with their circulation, helps with their numbers, and well, this way basically you get to read comic books for free. And I don't see anything wrong with reading comic books for free, especially if it's illegal. First up, we have the Avengers, the Kree Skrull War. Okay, so I was never a huge Avengers fan before New Avengers. I didn't find them interesting. I gave it a shot basically because it was Bendis. But other crossovers with Fatal Attractions and things like that, Blood Ties, every time I had to read an Avengers book for Marvel, I felt like, this is pretty boring. But I gave this one a shot. Seriously, think about issues 89 through 97, the original Avengers books, 1971 to 1972. I read this because everybody basically talks about the Kree Skrull War, and I wanted to know what it was all about. Again, I'm glad I didn't pay for it. It's interesting. Maybe if I had grown up with the Silver Age type of dialogue, I would love this book and be nostalgic for it. But basically, I found it pretty repetitive and juvenile. The one thing I do want to point out, on page 75, basically, issue 98, 1971. Rick Jones, right here, this page, is complaining about how difficult it is to tell good guys from bad guys. The gray line and all this other stuff being that you need like a scorecard figuring out who the good guys and bad guys are anymore. I hear consistently people complaining about how dark comic books are and how dark the Avengers are and how Luke Cage isn't a hero. In 1971, they were talking about darkness in the Avengers and how nobody likes the Avengers. And one of the subplots of this book is the entire world turning against the Avengers. What's going on right now with what Bendis is doing is not new. I'm not saying anything against Bendis. What I'm saying is all these Silver Age Avengers fans who always yell about it, seriously, you're looking through a very, very silver lining nostalgic cloud. Again, glad I didn't pay for it, but I'm also very glad that I read this. Very important book. Thor Visionaries, Walter Simonson, Volume 1. Wow. Before the JMS series, I never read an issue of Thor except for the one that introduced New Warriors. I'm so happy that my buddy Benderbrow and everybody else on the Outhouse podcast, that's the outhouses.com, greatest comic book website on the planet, told me that this is where to start if I wanted to read and learn about more Thor. This one I can't wait to read the other 3 volumes, 2, 3, and 4. I cannot recommend this enough. Again, I got this from the library, but I'll probably buy this and the rest of them later. I will say this about this book and the Avengers Kree Skrull War, very wordy, and I mean that in a good way. I think it took me longer to read each of these books by themselves than most of the other stuff I'm going to review. Very in depth. With Avengers, it was pretty repetitive, but with this one, great way to tell a story. Again, seriously, very, very, very good book. Highly recommended. Introduces Beta Ray Bill. Daredevil Visionaries, Frank Miller, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I'm about to get in a lot of trouble. Overrated. Volume 1 you can just do without. All Frank Miller doing here is drawing it. He's not writing it. Unless you're a Daredevil completist or Frank Miller completist, don't bother with this one. None of the stories here really matter here, except for one of the girlfriends, and it's repeated enough that you figure it out. Volume 2 is basically the original Elektra storyline. The art is gorgeous. I like Frank Miller's art. Maybe it's because that everybody knows what happens here from any Daredevil Elektra flashback, but the problem is the flashbacks are usually better than the story itself. When I read this, I was very disappointed and very let down. Basically, all this did was, in my mind, establish Bullseye and Kingpin and everybody else as the badasses we've come to know them as. That's what happened here. The Elektra Daredevil love story, they never get together. And I'm sorry, these are trades. I'm dealing with trades from 1982 right now. I don't care if I spoil this for you. No offense. Seriously, I know that I'm going to get in trouble for this, but this is incredibly overrated. Definitely get this from the library if you need to read it. Don't pay for it at all. Borrow your buddies who won't admit that he wasted his money. Captain America Road to Reborn. This is 4950, 600, and 601. I've been enjoying Brubaker and Captain, but this collection, is a big bag of meh. 600 was a great comic. Other than that, I could have I read the comic as an ongoing, so I wasn't not going to read it, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. But what was, I can't believe how good this was. Sinister Spider-Man, Dark Reign Sinister Spider-Man, Brian Reed, and I never pronounce his name right, Chris Balaco, whatever. This was a great limited series. Again, just like Dark X-Men, part of Dark Reign that went right under the radar. This also opens up with Amazing Spider-Man Family #8, part 1 of those stories. This seriously is one of the most touching and heart-wrenching stories I've ever read. If you don't even care about Sinister Spider-Man, read Amazing Spider-Man Family #8. But this was just so much fun. The dark comedy here, along with the art and the story. I was cracking up through most of this book. Of course, it's a Dark Reign mini. Nothing important happens that's going to affect anything else. But this was seriously, I cannot recommend this book enough for the sheer fun of it. Probably in a couple years when I want to reread it, I'm going to buy this one. Very good, very fun book. Great art, great writing. The Outhouse, we recently did an interview with Brian Reed. I highly recommend you look at that podcast. But this and his Miss Marvel and Siege Embedded, I think I'm becoming a Brian Reed wankfest. I haven't read anything by him I haven't enjoyed. Moving on to Orbiter original graphic novel. This is a really cool sci-fi story about spaceflight. And by that, I mean, like, it's not alien. Well, it's not really about aliens and all this other stuff. It's basically Warren Ellis's love letter to NASA and just how important space exploration is. Reading this is why I always try a Warren Ellis book. He has a knack for either learning things and making me feel like, oh wow, that's definitely the right jargon, or making up jargon to the point that when I read things like this, I'm like, well, that's the right jargon. Very touching. It tells me why spaceflight is still important. This is published right after the Columbia disaster. Very, very good book. I can't recommend Orbiter enough. I read this in one sitting. And yeah, I know it's not that thick, but I didn't want to put it down. I had planned to go play video games with a buddy, and I was late because I had to finish this. It was that good. Highly recommend it. This right here is why I always read Warren Ellis. This right here, Gravel, is why people get sick and tired of Warren Ellis. Oh my god. This book, it's gross and violent just for the sake of it. Because Avatar lets Warren Ellis do whatever he wants. And I love Crossed. But Gravel, like, you look at the series pencil work, and this art is gorgeous. I hope that this guy, like Wolfer, gets more work. But this is just gross and disgusting for the sake of it. When I finished, I was glad when it was done, so I didn't have to keep reading it. I didn't pay for it, I got it from the library, but I felt like this responsibility to finish this book, and they just let him do whatever he wants half the time, and things like this is why people are like, oh, Warren Ellis, isn't he the gross one? Yeah, sometimes he is.